Does Five Nights at Freddy's really need an introduction at this point? It's probably one of the most influential game franchises of the past decade. An entire subgenre of horror was created, or at least popularized because of it, for better or for worse. Back in August, FNAF celebrated its 10th anniversary, and a brand new thing came out every day from the 1st of August to the 8th. In that time, not only was a new game and collab announced, but some fanware stuff, a free book, and a demo for a new game called Five Nights at Freddy's was released. All these announcements and releases were pretty good, and judging by the demo, Five Nights at Freddy's has a lot of potential. That's the nicest thing I can say about this game so far. However, the things I just listed weren't the only things that came out for the celebration, as on the franchise's actual anniversary day, a brand new game called Into the Pit came out, which is based off a short story in a book of the same name. Into the Pit is the first FNAF game developed by Megacast Studios, an indie game company created in 2015 that mostly makes games of a more retro art style. The game was received very well when it came out, with it getting overwhelmingly positive reviews on Steam, with some people even saying that it's the best FNAF game ever. I played it when it first came out, and while I didn't think it was the best FNAF game, Helpules 2 was just more fun in my opinion, I still thought that it was really good. In fact, I liked Into the Pit so much that while making my original video on it, I got the idea to make a much bigger video analyzing it like I did for Security Breach, and then I thought that if I was going to make a big video about Into the Pit, I might as well talk about the story it's based on. I could even do a little section at the end where I compare the two. Then I remembered that there's also an Into the Pit graphic novel, so I also thought that I might as well cover that. After all, if I'm already talking about the original book and game, I might as well cover all my bases. But then I remembered that in December, an interactive novel based on Into the Pit was going to come out, and well, I look pretty stupid if I made a massive video on Into the Pit and skipped the interactive novel. So what was originally meant to be a video simply covering the game has now turned into a video where I cover 3 books as well. I can hardly contain my excitement. Honestly though, I actually enjoy reading. I don't mean to brag or anything, but I've read every Harry Potter book like 6 times. Okay, maybe there's not a lot to brag about, but I still did it. Also, I want to see how much is done differently in every version of Into the Pit. Most adaptations aren't 100% accurate, which can be both a good thing or a bad thing. Anyways, this intro has gone on for long enough, so without further ado, let's go take a deep dive into the pit. Many things happened in the year 2019. Facebook had to pay a $5 billion fine to the FCC for lying about how it handles users' data. Wildfires destroyed a lot of the Amazon rainforest, and of course, the Playmobil movie came out. However, the single most important thing that happened in 2019 was the release of the first book in the Fazbear Frights series, that being Into the Pit. For those who don't know what Fazbear Frights is, it's a presumably non-canon FNAF book series, with each book having 3 very scary stories and an epilogue that use their non-canon status to introduce interesting concepts like Fazgoo. This is real. We're not here to waste your time talking about guys giving birth to Springtrap though. We're here to talk about Into the Pit, so let's start doing that. Into the Pit is about Oswald, the kid that wishes for something interesting to happen in the terrible and boring town he lives in. You see, the town used to be actually good, and it had things like a movie theater, game store, and even a Waffle House. However, the mill that the entire town pretty much revolved around ended up closing down, and since then, not only has the town fallen into ruin, but Oswald's dad also lost his job, causing him to get a part-time one at a store, where the pay isn't exactly great because nobody gets fair pay in the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise. Anyways, Oswald is about to start his last day of school, but once he gets there, he runs into the scariest FNAF villain of all, Dylan Cooper, the school bully, who shares the last name with Sheldon Cooper from popular American sitcom The Big Bang Theory. Dylan has a stupid nickname for Oswald because, well, he's a bully, and that nickname is Oswald the Ocelot. It's explained that Dylan chose this name for him because of a show of a pink ocelot named Oswald. More importantly, Dylan also calls him this because he found out that the guy that assassinated John F. Kennedy was called Lee Harvey Oswald. I did not expect the Kennedy assassination to be brought up 5 pages into this Five Nights at Freddy's book about a time-traveling ball pit, but sure, why not? Also, for some reason, in his free time, Oswald finds himself drawing mechanical bears, bunnies, and birds. I wonder who he could be drawing. Oh, and by the way, Oswald, maybe you wouldn't be getting bullied so much if you weren't making FNAF fan art in school like a loser. Take that off the screen right now. So Oswald goes back home once the school day ends, and his dad makes some mac and cheese. I only bring this up because Oswald's dad eats his mac and cheese with ketchup, and I used to do that as a kid. I did not realize that was like a thing people did, so thank you for the mac and cheese with ketchup representation, Freddy. Anyways, now that it's summer, Oswald's dad tells him to go to the library and Jeff's Pizza while he and his mom work so that he isn't home alone. Once Oswald gets to Jeff's Pizza, he sees a pulpit that's been roped off and has a do not use sign on it. Judging by the book's title, this will be important later. Also gets a pizza slice, and then we get the first sign of Jeff being the best character in his franchise when he offers Oswald free pizza that he didn't sell during lunch and refills his orange soda. What a nice guy. Then Oswald's dad picks him up, and the cycle of going to the library, eating at Jeff's Pizza, and going home starts. However, on yet another drive to the library, Oswald finally snaps and tells his dad that he's sick of doing the same boring routine over and over again, and that his friend's dad got a much better job than the mill. Oh yeah, Oswald has a friend that moved away. I don't I don't think I've ever mentioned that. Oswald saying this makes him and his dad mad at each other, so when he gets to Jeff's pizza, Oswald gets the idea to pull a hilarious prank on him. That prank is to hide inside the ball pit in order to scare his dad a bit when he goes looking for him. However, when Oswald goes out of the pit, he finds out that he's not in Kansas anymore. Yes, that's the line they use. Speaking of which, there's a couple of Wizard of Oz references in not only this book, but also the graphic novel, game, and probably the interactive novel as well. I don't know, it's not out yet. I'm sure these references are here for a reason, but I've never seen the Wizard of Oz, so I can't exactly tell you what that reason is. Anyways, Oswald is now in some mysterious pizzeria that looks like Jeff's pizza if it was actually good. That's because, as it turns out, he went into one of those time-traveling ball pits and is now in the past. Oswald explores the pizzeria for a bit, and eventually he runs into a mechanical animal band whose members look just like the animals he draws. Also, the animatronics each get a description, and Bonnie is described as blue, which is simply not true. He's purple, and that's a hill I will die on. Then Oswald smells some pizza and sees a mural of the animal characters with the words Freddy Fazbear's Pizza beneath them, which is how Oswald realizes that he went back in time. I'm not really sure why they decided to make Oswald realize he time traveled after smelling pizza instead of having him realize that upon seeing the mural, but whatever. Oswald continues exploring, and he eventually runs into Chip and Mike, two kids who are big FNAF fans. Chip and Mike invite Oswald to play Skeeball with them, and while walking to the arcade, they pass by a mysterious yellow rabbit that only Oswald seems to notice. Oh crap, things are about to get real. Except I lied, because Oswald goes back into the pit after realizing that he spent too long at Freddy's. You know, I was kinda hoping that the main conflict of the story would actually start now that we're 18 pages into this 34-page thing, but I guess Freddy's gotta wait. Also, Oswald finds out that no time has passed in the present while he was in the past, which is a rule that's gonna be broken pretty quickly. Anyways, Oswald keeps going into and out of the past to spend time with Chip and Mike, but when he returns one day, things are a bit different. Instead of hearing cheering children and the Faz Gang's epic music, Oswald hears lots of screaming. You see, the one thing I haven't mentioned is that the year Oswald goes back in time to is 1985, which is the same year that some kids were missing at Freddy's, so guess what's happening right now? Oswald goes looking for Chip and Mike, but instead, he runs into the Yellow Rabbit, or Pitbonnie as I'll be calling him for the rest of the video. Pitbonnie goes through a door marked private, and since Oswald is a dumb little child, he decides to follow him. Pitbonnie then opens the door to a party room, where Oswald sees something truly terrifying. 6 dead bodies. This is easily the most disturbing part of the book. It's obviously nothing too graphic, this is literally a book for 12-year-olds after all, but the scene was pretty detailed, at least for a piece of Five Nights at Freddy's media. Anyways, Oswald runs away from Pitbonnie because as it turns out, he was evil this whole time, and he goes back into the pit. Once he goes back to the present, Oswald runs into his dad, who went to the ball pit to look for him. I'm not sure how this happened because it was established that no time passes by in the present while Oswald is in the past, so Oswald's dad should not be here yet. There's no time to think about that though, because suddenly Pitbonnie comes out of the pit and drags his dad inside. Then Pitbonnie takes Oswald to his dad's car and drives him home. Oswald decides to go to his room and call his mom to ask her to come home, saying that something is wrong with his dad, but when she arrives, she thinks that Pitbonnie is his dad, meaning that the only other person to know about Pitbonnie besides Oswald is his cat. I've never mentioned this, but Oswald has a cat named Jinx, like the main villain in the Garfield movie, so...
Some people noted that the Garfield theming diminished the aura of romance.
Anyways, Oswald goes back to sleep as the next day is his first day of school. When he goes there, he meets this girl named Gabrielle, who drops some epic Greek mythology lore, motivating Oswald to go back into the pit and save his dad. This was not a very hard task to accomplish though, as his dad was just kind of unconscious in the ball pit this whole time. Oswald pulls his dad out, but as it turns out, Pitbonnie was right behind him. This child and yellow rabbit monster begin fighting, and Pitbonnie throws Oswald into the pit. However, Oswald isn't going down without a fight, and he rises from the pit, ready to give Pitbonnie a knuckle sandwich, and oh, as it turns out, Pitbonnie ended up getting tangled in the ball pit's ropes and hanging himself while he was throwing Oswald. Well, that's anticlimactic. Then Oswald's dad wakes up, and since the real story will make him sound insane, Oswald lies and tells his dad that he tripped on a ball while looking for him in the pit, hit his head, and fell unconscious. The two apologize to each other, his dad acknowledges the dead hanging guy, and they leave the pizzeria. The end. So that was the IntothePit book, and I actually ended up liking it more than I thought I would. The book has some problems that I will get into, but I still thought it was pretty good. I think that the story is pretty interesting. Pitbonnie replacing Oswald's dad with nobody but Oswald himself noticing this is a pretty cool idea, and the time traveling ball pit is a cool way to show the event that the first 7 games entire plot revolves around without actually having a story about those events. I thought Oswald was a pretty good protagonist as well. I like how they managed to connect him to Freddy's without having him actually know about the place, with him drawing the characters in his free time for reasons not even he knows. I guess Freddy Fazbear just has that effect on people. Oswald is mostly believable as a child protagonist as well. He does stupid things like hide in a ball pit or follow his rabbit freak because he's mad at his dad or trying to find his friends. However, I said that he's mostly believable because I refuse to believe that anybody ever would say the line, Toto, I don't think we're in Kansas anymore, let alone a 10-year-old child. It also doesn't help that this book presumably takes place in a modern day, what with the mentioning of YouTube and Netflix and PlayStation. Glad to know that the FNAF universe also has a console with only one game. This sign doesn't ruin Oswald's character or anything, but I don't know, I think it's up to with Gregory's epic meats pretzel line on a list of things a child never has and never will say. I'm a bit conflicted on the side characters though. I like Oswald's dad and the relationship he has with Oswald, and also Jeff is the best character ever, but the other side characters are just kind of there. Oswald's mom doesn't really do much, so she's apparently the clue master, and Jim and Mike are just here to give Oswald a reason to keep going back to Freddy's. I honestly couldn't tell you anything about them except that they're big Freddy Fazbear fans, and that they're also nice since they don't mind that Oswald can't pay for arcade games and pizza. They also just kind of get forgotten about after Pitbonnie show up. They only get mentioned like one more time at the very end of the story, when Oswald is like, oh wow, I sure am sad I can't see Chip and Mike again, but I sure am glad I'm friends with Gabrielle. Speaking of which, Gabrielle and Dylan are even more pointless than Chip and Mike. Gabrielle shows up for the first time on page 30 of this 34-page book to give Oswald the motivation to save his dad, and Dylan just shows up at the start and end of the story to bully Oswald for 5 seconds and make the Kennedy assassination canon to the FNAF lore. That's the clue that solves FNAF, Matt Pat.
No one knows the monster I've become. Don't you tell me how many calories I need.
I mean, at least Gabrielle actually does something unlike Dylan, but like, if you've got 4 pages left of your book, why bother introducing a new character? There's absolutely not enough time to flesh them out. I'm not saying that every character needs to be incredibly developed or anything. I'm a Minions fan after all. I should be the last person talking about well-developed characters, but I don't know, if your character is pretty much just a plot device, I'm not really gonna care about them. I genuinely think that IntothePit would have worked much better with its own standalone book instead of being part of a short story collection, because there's definitely enough material here for a much larger story. I would like to see more of Oswald trying to go through his everyday life while simultaneously trying to deal with Pitbonnie. The story doesn't really have much of that since Oswald interacts with Pitbonnie for the first time on page 23, and by then there's only 11 pages left. Also, maybe there could have been a part where Oswald tries, or at least considers, finding Chip and Mike. I find it kind of weird how he just kind of forgets about them despite them being his only friends until he meets Gabrielle. Okay, there's one last thing I want to talk about before moving on to the graphic novel, and that's Pitbonnie himself. But before I give you my thoughts on him, I need to talk about what he is. However, to do that, I'll need to talk about Remnant, Agony, and what's actually going on with the time-traveling ball pit. I'm going to be using the highly credible news site known as the FNAF Wiki to explain these things, because the explanations for what Remnant and Agony are, as well as what the ball pit really does, are found in the book's epilogues, and I don't have the other books. So, Remnant is a physical manifestation of memories that end up possessing inanimate objects, and Agony is like Remnant, but instead of being made up of memories, it's made up of all the bad emotions people feel. So, the ball pit Into the Pit seemingly contains the Remnant and or Agony from the kids that died during the MCI, and also the people that Eleanor killed. I won't talk about Eleanor in this video unless she's an interactive novel or something, so all I need to know is that she's evil and looks like a freak. Anyways, the ball pit isn't actually sending Oswald back in time. Instead, it's showing Oswald the memories of the day William Afton did a murder or two at Freddy's. Speaking of William Purple Guy Afton, while you might think that Pitbonnie is him and he is Pitbonnie, he's actually a completely different thing. Instead, Pitbonnie seems to be made purely out of the agony of William's victims, and maybe other dead guys in the pit too. I don't know, this is really confusing and I'm probably getting stuff wrong. So if I am, please fact check me in the comments. I'm not a FNAF scholar. It's not really made clear in the book why Pitbonnie is so obsessed with Oswald, and I can't find an explanation for this online either, so as far as I'm aware, this is just an unexplained part of the story. I don't really mind though. I think it kind of adds to the ominous feel Pitbonnie has. It's never made clear what his motives are, he never says anything throughout the entire story, and it's never said what he is, just that he's not human, or even a living being for that matter. I like the way Pitbonnie is described in the book as well, with him having blank eyes and an unchanging grin. It's pretty spooky. That being said, I do have some problems with Pitbonnie. First of all, while I thought the part where he drove a car was pretty funny and didn't really make him any less threatening, the book then proceeds to point out that he stops at red lights and knows the basic rules of driving. Was including that little factoid really necessary? Did I need to know that this being made of pure agony passed driver's ed? I mean, it's pretty funny, yeah, but it comes at the cost of making Pitbonnie a bit less threatening. After all, he can't be that bad if he has the decency to stop at red lights. I'm sure the situation is all just one big misunderstanding. Finally, there's Pitbonnie's death. It sucks. I'm not against the idea of him dying by getting hanged. I actually think that the death is pulled off really well in one of the adaptations, but it's just so lame here. Like, Oswald doesn't even push him into the ropes, he just kind of stumbles into them because he's just a clumsy little guy. Despite the problems I have with him, I still thought that Pitbonnie was a really good villain, and I hope that the other adaptations retain the ominous feel he had here. Foreshadowing's leader, overall, Into the Pit was a pretty good book. It's not perfect, because obviously not, it's a FNAF book, and I wish it was longer, but I still had fun reading it. Let's see how the graphic novel manages to live up to this.
My agony's in a rush, I'm contemporaneous.
So, in August of 2022, the first book of the Fazbear Frights graphic novel series came out, because I don't know, it was just easy money I guess. The first book contains adaptations of the stories To Be Beautiful, Out of Stock, and of course, Into the Pit. This adaptation sets out to answer the question, what if Into the Pit had pictures and was really bad? The story in the graphic novel is pretty much identical to the one in the book, with the main differences being that the school part at the beginning, Dylan, and JFK were cut, so I won't even bother going over the story again since I just did that. Instead, I want to talk about the big Orville elephant in the room, that being the graphic novel's drawings. Look, I'm sure that the artist that made these drawings is a very talented person. In fact, I actually think that this drawing where Pitbonnie has his mouth open looks pretty cool, but other than that, yeah, the drawings here are not it. Anyways, my main issue with these drawings is the way that Pitbonnie himself is drawn. Not only is he inaccurate and looks different in every page, but also, his ominous factor was also taken out back and shot. His bow tie is red for some reason, and I genuinely don't know why. Pitbonnie is literally described as having a purple bow tie in the original book. Why isn't it purple here?
Boy, I really hope hope somebody got fired for that blunder.
Pitbonnie's buttons are also red, which is a really minor detail, but it still kind of bothers me. Whenever a character in this franchise has buttons, they're usually either black or a slightly different shade of the character's main color. Why are Pitbonnie's buttons red? They honestly look kind of ugly. Pitbonnie is also way too expressive here. The book describes him as having an unchanging grin, but in the graphic novel, he's making all kinds of wacky faces. I don't mind when characters in this franchise do some funny stuff, but we just learned that this guy killed 6 kids. He shouldn't be doing the shocked emoji face right now. His death is even worse here as well, because it looks like this, and he's also got a concerned expression on his face while he dies, which is just so lame. Pitbonnie being scared makes him less scary. Also, for some reason, there are kids interacting with Pitbonnie before he actually does anything, even though nobody should be able to see him. The book makes sure to say that even in the past, people can't see Pitbonnie. There shouldn't be people interacting with Pitbonnie because they shouldn't be able to see him in the first place.
Boy, I really hope somebody got fired.
That's all I have to say about Pitbonnie here. He's easily the most poorly handled part of the book, but I'm not done with my complaining because now I want to talk about the non-Pitbonnie drawings. First of all, Jeff, who was described as looking very disheveled in the original book, just kind of looks like a normal guy here, and the pizzeria itself just looks like a normal pizzeria. It's not just a pizzeria though, the entire town looks normal. I mean, sure, these panels here have some buildings that are slightly ruined, but apart from that, this town seems to be doing just fine. This library genuinely looks better and more modern than any library I've been to. The whole reason Oswald even hides in the pit is because he's sick of his boring life in the ruined town, so having this town not be that run down kind of takes away from that. Anyways, one of my least favorite parts of the graphic novel is the scene where Pitbonnie shows Oswald the missing kids because it got completely ruined here. They took this scene that I found genuinely unsettling and they ruined it. How could you, Freddy? Obviously, they can't actually show the dead kids. This is a little baby book for little babies, and little Timmy has got to be able to buy it at the Scholastic Book Fair, but the way they went about making the scene is awful. The kids all look like messed up versions of Cosmo Digital Circus.
Back to the circus, freak!
I think the scene could have been a lot more effective if all we saw was Oswald's reaction to the kids, leaving what he saw to the imagination. Doing that would have made sense as well, since this franchise leaves most of the dark stuff up to the imagination. The last thing I want to mention for this section is these 2 pieces of narration from the book that return to dialogue for Oswald, because it is just terrible. Okay, so for this, I'm just going to read 2 parts of the book word for word, and then follow it up by reading Oswald's dialogue in the graphic novel, just so you can see how these lines, which were by no means genius pieces of writing, got made infinitely worse in this thing. Mike slapped the table, laughing. E.T. was like 3 years ago. You really do need to get out more. Do they not have any movie theaters where you come from? They do, Oswald thought, and they have Netflix and PlayStation and YouTube and social media, but he didn't say it. E.T. was like 3 years ago. You really do need to get out more. Do they not have movie theaters where you come from? Oh sure, we've got movie theaters. I really like this one called Netflix. He was letting the rabbit lead him as if he were in a terrifying version of Alice in Wonderland, going down the rabbit hole. This is the worst version of Alice in Wonderland I've ever seen. These lines honestly make the original book seem Shakespearean in comparison. I mean, yeah, these lines are funny, that's part of the reason I even brought them up, but like, I'm laughing at the lines, not with them. Well, that's all I have to say for the graphic novel. Overall, I'm not impressed. Let's see if the IntothePit novel can do better.
Don't listen to a word he'd say. I hope he had a nice vacay, but he should have stayed away.
I didn't know if you knew this, but Five Nights at Freddy's is like a game franchise. And well, let's be honest, there's not exactly a big overlap between people that play games and people that read books, which is probably one of the reasons as to why a lot of FNAF fans haven't read the books. The other reason is Springchild birthing. If only there was some way to get more games fans to read the books and give Freddy more money. Wait a minute, what if the books were like games? That's a great way to get people that only play the games to read them. So, during the franchise's 10th anniversary, the first of 4 interactive books came out, that being VIP. VIP was followed by the week before, which is followed by the final novel until Escape the Pizzaplex comes out, that being Return to the Pit. Yeah, seems like after all this time, we're finally getting a sequel story to Into the Pit. Oswald is going back to Freddy's to solve the mystery of Pitbonnie once and for all. Never mind, it's just Into the Pit again. I think Scott Cawthon has an unhealthy obsession with Freddy's time-traveling balls. By the way, Return to the Pit is the most recent adaptation of Into the Pit, as it came out on December 24th, but I'm talking about it before the game because I care about the game the most, and I also just have the most to say about that. Return to the Pit is, at its core, yet another retelling of the original story. The book gives you the illusion of choice by giving you multiple branching paths, but most of them end up leading to nothing. For example, at one point in the book, you get to pick one of 3 prizes from Freddy's, those being a flashlight, Freddy action figure, or a pair of yellow rabbit ears. If you pick the flashlight, you'll have 1 opportunity to use it, and doing so will lead to a game over. If you pick a pair of rabbit ears, that will lead to Oswald becoming possessed by Pitbonnie, leading to a game over. If you pick the Freddy toy, nothing happens and never gets brought up again. I'm not expecting every little choice to have massive impacts on the story, but I don't know, giving you the option to pick 3 items only for none of them to matter is pretty stupid. That's not all though, because you get punished pretty much any time you decide to deviate from the original story's progression of events. Want to escape Pitbonnie while he takes you to Dad's car? Too bad, he runs you over. Want to go to Jeff's instead of calling Mom when you get home? Too bad, he ball out of the window. Want to run away after seeing Pitbonnie eating breakfast? Well, too bad, because he runs you over again. He likes doing that that a lot. I guess he was inspired by how David died. By the way, if you decide to run away during the breakfast scene, then you don't automatically get run over by Pitbonnie. You see, somebody in a car will be telling you to get inside, and doing so will reveal that it's none other than present-day Chip. Chip says that he knows about all of the time travel shenanigans, saying that he's part of a team trying to hunt Pitbonnie down. Chip asks Oswald if he wants to join, and he says yes. Okay, he can say no as well, but that leads to Pitbonnie running him over again. Somebody really needs their license revoked. You'd think that this whole Pitbonnie hunters thing would lead to an ending, but no, it doesn't. Every single choice from here leads to a game over. Oswald dies to Pitbonnie. Oswald and Gabrielle die to Pitbonnie. Chip gets a bite of 87 while Oswald gets shot by someone trying to kill Pitbonnie. This book is truly something. I mean, I guess this path reveals that Gabrielle is Chip's daughter, which is a cool way to tie everything together, and it also implies that Oswald's dad is the leader of the Pitbonnie hunters, which is interesting, but I don't know. I would have liked to see an actual ending come out of all of this. It doesn't even need to be canon or anything. Just something that isn't also getting killed by Pitbonnie for the 10th time in a row. Speaking of which, Return to the Pit has 3 endings. The canon ending is just one from the original story, but you find half of a gold token that matches with the half token you could have found earlier in the book. If you didn't find that token half, then you get the other ending where the book tells you that something is missing. So they're pretty much just the same ending. The third and secret ending has you go back to the start of the story with both token halves to use a mysterious arcade machine at Freddy's, which takes Oswald to a video game world where he needs to save kids from Pitbonnie and feed them cake. Once he does so, all of the kids disappear. I wish I could tell you what that means, but I genuinely don't know. After the kids disappear, Oswald gets sent back to Jeff's Pizza, where it's revealed that 5 kids were saved from being killed and Pitbonnie has been arrested. Also, Jeff's Pizza doesn't look so run down anymore, implying that Oswald's town is the way it is because of what happened at Freddy's, which now that I think about it is pretty obvious. I don't know how I didn't realize that until now. I feel like I've been pretty negative so far, but honestly, I like Return to the Pit. While the interactive elements are lame, the writing and story are pretty good. Again, the book is pretty much just a retelling of the original, but it's a bit more detailed. Since the book is in second person and the reader is Oswald, we get to see more of his thoughts. We see how much he hates his town, how he draws to escape his mundane life, how he feels guilty when he gets in fights with his dad, who Oswald is mad at even though he knows he's just trying to do his best. Also, in a game over, we see that if Oswald decided not to agree to his dad's idea of going to Jeff's, the two would have slowly drifted apart until they just stopped communicating altogether. I think having the events that transpired because of the ball pit, essential to Oswald keeping a healthy relationship with his dad, is pretty cool. Oh, and they brought back the part where Pitbonnie stops at a red light, but it's actually not that stupid here. You see, earlier on in the book, Oswald notes how his dad always stops at a red light, even when there's no cars. Since Pitbonnie is trying to replace Oswald's dad, having him stop at a red light when there's no cars just like he does is a nice detail. Pitbonnie is pretty menacing in this book as well. He's a bit more aggressive than in the original story. Again, he literally bites the guy's head off. Even before the MCI scene, Pitbonnie is trying to kill Oswald. Sure, he's just standing in the corner like in the original, but he'll be trying to lure Oswald over to him so that he can do a murder. Pitbonnie seems to really target Oswald in this one. There's a game over where Oswald leaves Freddy's pretty much the second he gets there because it's weird, only to get killed by Pitbonnie. My theory as to why Pitbonnie wants Oswald in particular is that he's the son of the Pitbonnie Hunter's leader, but I don't know, maybe there's another reason. Also, I like the Pitbonnie drawings found throughout the book. This is easily the character's most unsettling design. This drawing of Pitbonnie at the breakfast table is both very funny and very threatening. Oh, and by the way, Bonnie is described as purple in this book. Hooray. Return to the Pit seems to suggest that the ball pit can actually time travel instead of just show memories, as there's a game over where Oswald gets stuck in the past and returns to the present day as an old person, and present day Chip remembers being at Freddy's with Oswald. Also, Oswald literally changes the past in a secret ending. I actually don't mind that time travel is a thing in this book. I feel like that's more interesting than memory balls, and besides, this is just a non-canon spin-off book. Who cares what wacky concepts are introduced? What do you mean it's canon? Yeah, so unlike something like Tales from the Pizzaplex, which may or may not be canon, the interactive novels are pretty much confirmed to be canon. While I couldn't find any direct ties to the games in VIP, it is stated that locations from Security Breach, such as Monty Golf, are under construction during the events of the book. The upcoming Escape to the Pizzaplex is about Cassie from Ruin, and the week before is literally just a FNAF 1 prequel telling the story of Phone Guy. Also, instead of finding 6 dead kids in Return to the Pit, Oswald finds 5, which is more in line with the game's version of the MCI. I'll get more into my thoughts on Return to the Pit being the canon one when I talk about the game, but I honestly don't mind that much. Is the introduction of time travel to the game's lore a bit weird? Yes, but like we've already got magical AR masks that allow people to phase through walls. This franchise isn't new to weird concepts. Also, even though it's canon, Return to the Pit is still a spin-off with no major ties to the actual story. Sure, time travel might exist, but the Mimic isn't going to go on any wacky time travel adventures anytime soon. To end this section, Return to the Pit is a pretty bad interactive novel, but a pretty good book. Sure, I was disappointed that the only real path to take that doesn't end in the game over is just the original story again, but I think that this is a better version of that story, and some of the reveals that the paths have, specifically the Pitbonnie Hunters one, are pretty cool. If you wanted to buy a FNAF interactive novel, I'd recommend The Week Before. It's actually interactive unlike Return to the Pit, and the story is just really interesting. It's easily my favorite of the 5 FNAF books I've read. Well, I'm officially finished talking about the 3 Into the Pit books. In my opinion, Return to the Pit is the best one, and the graphic novel is the worst, like by a long shot. But enough with this literature. Do I look like a nerd to you? It's time to talk about the main attraction, the game. Well, we're finally talking about the game. You know, the main reason I'm even making this video. Took me long enough to get here. Like I said at the start of the video, Into the Pit isn't my favorite FNAF game. How could it be when Freddy in Space 2 exists? But I still consider this to be the most special one. To explain why I think that though, I'm ready to actually talk about the game, starting with the story. The Into the Pit game starts off just like the book it's based on. Oswald is sick of his boring life and his dad takes him to Jeff's Pizza. However, this is when things start to change, because Oswald immediately decides to go into the pit. Unlike in the book where it took like 15 pages for Oswald to go to Freddy's. Oswald meets Chip and Mike here like in the book, and they decide to play some games with Oswald like Skeeball, Tag, and Hide and Seek. During the Hide and Seek segment, the game decides to once again skip some parts of the book. You see, Oswald decides to hide inside of a golden Freddy suit he found, but then he shows up. So yeah, unlike the book, the game immediately introduces Pitbonnie instead of waiting a while, which was a pretty smart decision because the game would have been really boring if they waited until a halfway point to introduce an actual threat. After Pitbonnie shows up, the game's story is identical to the books for a while. Oswald follows Pitbonnie to find Chip and Mike stumbling upon the dead kids. Unlike the graphic novel though, the scene is actually done well. All we see of the kids are their feet, with Pitbonnie standing there menacingly until he gets hit by a table Oswald throws because this kid is really strong for some reason. The way the game handles the scene leaves a lot more to the imagination than whatever this is, and that helps make it a lot more scary. Things continue to be unchanged after this as Oswald runs back to the present. Pitbonnie replaces his dad and brings Oswald home. The game once again decides to change stuff in the book here, as now Oswald proceeds to go over to Jeff's Pizza in order to go to the ball pit and find his dad. However, instead of finding his dad inside the ball pit and fighting Pitbonnie like in the book, Oswald goes back into the pit and gets taken to the past once again. Once he gets out of the pit, Oswald hears someone crying, and once he goes over to investigate, he finds a kid trapped inside of an endoskeleton. You see, in the game version of Into the Pit, Oswald is not just trying to save his dad, he's also trying to save some random kids Pitbonnie trapped inside of the pizzeria, as a new one seems to show up every night. I think this was a good addition to the story. It gives an actual reason as to why Oswald has to keep coming back to Freddy's for 5 nights, since he probably could have found his dad really quickly if he didn't have to worry about the kids. There's really not much that happens in the story after this until the end of the game. Each night also goes into the pit to look for his dad, but ends up finding a trapped kid. He tries to save them, but a member of the Freddy fans gang is blocking his path. Looks like Oswald's gotta go back to the future to get something and distract them. He ends up managing to save the kid, gets chased by Pitbonnie, and then that formula gets repeated until night 5. Before I talk about night 5 though, I guess I should probably mention the school subplot, which is honestly pretty half-baked. After every night before night 5, Oswald goes to school because that's what children do. Here, he asks the kid called Jet for a firecracker and also helps the principal open her door. Yeah, there's not much going on in Freddy Fast School. I mean, Dylan and Gabrielle return here, but they're just as pointless as in the book. The game doesn't even explain why Dylan calls Oswald the Ocelot. I can't believe they once again forgot to mention the Kennedy assassination. Gabrielle shows up one time to give Oswald a book her grandpa made about the animatronics, and then she just disappears for the entire game, with her second appearance being completely skippable depending on when you get a firecracker from Jet. By the way, this exchange happens in front of a library which you can't even enter, and that just makes me wonder why it's even here. The part where Jet gives you the firecracker might as well have happened in front of the school, which honestly would have been better from a gameplay standpoint too, because you actually need the firecracker to progress like an hour or so after Jet tells you to meet him at the library. Most people will probably have forgotten about that by this point. I know I did. Apparently there were plans to make the library an actual place you can enter, but it was scrapped for some reason, and I genuinely don't know why. I don't even think there needs to be anything important in the library. I just want to see what it looks like on the inside. They even made an animated librarian character that was scrapped. Why did they scrap her? If Megacat Studios didn't want to make the inside of the library, they could have just had the librarian out front to tell Oswald that it's closed. There, I just provided a story reason as to why you can't enter the library. It still sucks, but hey, at least there's a reason now. I should probably get back to talking about the actual story now, shouldn't I?
Come on. What? They de-cheeked him.
The school stuff didn't even get a proper conclusion, by the way. The subplot abruptly ends on night 4 after Oswald punches Dylan because he was being a bully, and that made Oswald think he was Freddy Fazbear. On one hand, I don't mind a lackluster school story. Nobody plays the Five Nights at Freddy's game to go to school, and the abrupt ending of it shows that the game is meeting Lord Business now, since the game becomes more horror focused after this. But on the other hand, if you're going through the trouble of adding a school subplot to your game, then you might as well flesh it out a bit. This was the perfect opportunity to expand on Oswald and Gabrielle's friendship, since the book kind of touched on that near the end, but they interact even less in the game than they do in the book, so whatever. Anyways, on the 5th night, Oswald decides to log in and decides that it's time to end the nightmare. He's gonna save his dad once and for all. Unfortunately, Jeff decided to lock the ball pit's door because I guess he finally realized he shouldn't let guests interact with something filled with diseases unknown to science, so Oswald has to ask him for the key. Jeff gives the key to Oswald, but as he walks over to the pit, he's met by none other than Pitbonnie. With Pitbonnie on his tail, Oswald runs to the pit, goes to the past, and just barely ends up escaping Pitbonnie. Also, I just want to point out that during this chase sequence, Pitbonnie recreates the game's cover art, which is pretty cool. Anyways, Oswald eventually realizes that there's only one room he's yet to look for his dad in, that being the party room where he initially found the missing kids. He finds the party room key, enters the room, and finds yet another trapped kid, because Pitbonnie's collecting them like Pokemon cards or something, I don't know. It's actually never explained why Pitbonnie just kind of keeps these kids around, even though he's perfectly okay with child murder. After saving the kid, Oswald sneaks through a vent and finds his dad, but then Pitbonnie shows up and drags him to the pit. Oswald rushes to save his dad, and here's where you can get 4 of the game's 5 endings. For the game's normal or 1-star ending, Oswald punches Pitbonnie, saves his dad, and takes him back to the present. However, Pitbonnie actually goes to the present as well, dragging Oswald back into the pit, and the game ends with him presumably killing Oswald. The escape ending can be accessed at pretty much any point in the game, and in it, Oswald just kind of leaves Freddy's and runs away. I'm not sure why he does this in 1985 and not in the present, but okay. In the game's bad ending, Oswald doesn't punch Pitbonnie when he needs to, and he gets taken to the pizzeria's front stage. Oswald slowly walks through the hallway as the Freddy fans gang wave at him, and his name gets more and more simplified, as if he's starting to no longer be himself. Finally, Oswald stops at Pirate's Cove with Pitbonnie right in front of him, and his eyes turn blue. Sans Undertale?
He calls on the power of Sans Undertale!
Then there's a 2-star ending, which you can collect by collecting items from Oswald's dad around the pizzeria. Don't worry, I'll get to those later. Once you find them all, the girl in the party room will give you the strange photo. Now, when Oswald goes to save his dad, he'll drop the photo, causing Pitbonnie to start tweaking Golden Freddy style. Pitbonnie's not gonna let him tweaking and freaking ruin his murder plans though, because like the 1-star ending, he ends up following Oswald back to the present. However, this time, the outcome is a little different. The game somehow managed to take the incredibly underwhelming death from the books and turn it into the best one of the franchise. I mean, that's not really saying much when the other deaths look like this, but still, this was really well done. Like the book, once Pitbonnie dies, Oswald apologizes to his dad for hiding the ball pit, telling his dad how he slipped on a ball and fell. Then, his dad says that he forgives Oswald and that they'll move to a better town. What a wholesome ending. Wait, where's Jeff going? What? Jeff dies in this ending? This is cruel. This is despicable. How could Megacat Studios do this? If only there was an ending that had a happy ending for Oswald and his dad, while keeping Jeff alive. To unlock the game's true 3-star ending, you need to find all of Dad's items, beat the 3 secret minigames, and fix and beat all of Jeff's Pizza's arcade cabinets. This is easily the most time-consuming ending of the bunch, though the ending itself is literally just a 2-star ending again, but with one difference. Oswald's family doesn't move. And instead of Jeff dying, we get a nice scene of Oswald and his family eating at an hour for Rich Jeff's Pizza. The only thing Oswald did that really affected Jeff's Pizza was fix the arcade machines, and here we see that the place actually looks good now, which probably cost Jeff a lot of money. In order to spend money, Jeff had to make money, meaning that more people were dining at Jeff's Pizzas once the cabinets were fixed. If the townspeople were spending more money, it can also be implied that they were making more money, potentially because the arcade cabinets at the pizzeria finally got fixed. After all, that's the only change we see happen in the town throughout the entire game. Maybe fixing the cabinets somehow made more people visit the town and give it more money. Therefore, it can be inferred that this child helped restore an entire town's economy just by putting one part in a couple of arcade machines, and I think it's a very important part of the FNAF lore. So that's the story of IntothePit. Overall, I really like it. My main complaints are that the school subplot is undercooked, and that there's really no interaction between Oswald and his dad like in the book, which makes him being taken by Pitbonnie feel slightly less impactful than it should. Except, I lied, because the game actually does have more moments between Oswald and his dad, which comes in the form of Dad's items you can find around Freddy's. You see, by interacting with these items, you get to see things like how Oswald is sad his dad couldn't take a photo of him on the first day of school like he usually does, the day his dad told him he lost his job, or the time he worked overtime just to buy Oswald a toy he wanted. This guy really is the George Cooper of FNAF. These items make Oswald losing his dad so much more devastating. I can't believe I'm about to say this, but reading them is the closest a FNAF game has gotten to making me cry. How did Freddy Fazbear almost make me cry? Honestly, my main problem with IntothePit's story is that it's just not canon. Like, I don't know, I feel like the story is made a bit lamer by the fact that it didn't really happen. Things like the events from Dad's items or Jeff's Pizza becoming actually good didn't really happen. Also, I didn't mention this, but the game implies that Oswald's dad is the Freddy guy from the Bite of 87, since you can find the Freddy mask in his attic, and like, this is a lot more interesting than him being the leader of the Pitbonnie hunters. Hope 1 and 2 implies that Cassie's dad is the Bonnie kid, so having Oswald's dad be the Freddy kid is a nice way to connect IntothePit to the main story without actually impacting it. But since the game isn't canon and Return to the Pit has no mention of the Freddy mask, I guess the school connection is just gone. Not only that, but I just find it weird how Scott Cawthon decided to make an entire IntothePit game that is really good and becomes one of the most well-received FNAF games in ages, only to make a random interactive novel the canon one. Honestly, instead of making a whole new interactive novel, I wish Scott Cawthon just took ideas from it, like Oswald meeting present-day Chip or Gabrielle being Chip's daughter, and put put them in the game. That way the game story would be a bit more fleshed out and it would actually be the canon one. I don't know if I'm even making sense, and maybe this is just a me thing and nobody else cares that the game isn't canon, but this is my video and I get to complain about whatever I want. Well, that's all I have to say about the game story. Now I want to talk about the most important part of any game, the gameplay. IntothePit's gameplay is honestly really fun. It's kind of like a small scale version of Security Breach's gameplay, and while I did enjoy the gameplay loop in Security Breach, scaling it down a bit was definitely the right choice. The gameplay of IntothePit consists of trying to go somewhere or find something while avoiding Pitbonnie and the other animatronics. Pitbonnie is the only animatronic that can actually kill you, and he'll begin running after you if you get into his line of sight. If you're being chased by Pitbonnie, you can escape him by going into a hiding spot. Doing this will trigger a hiding minigame, which I'll get more into later. The other animatronics, those being Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica, serve the same purpose as staff bots do in Security Breach. They're here to either slow you down or call Pitbonnie over to you. Chica is the first animatronic to show up, and she's probably the one you'll be running into the most. She walks around the pizzeria, and when you go near her, she'll call Pitbonnie over to you by making a loud noise and raising the noise meter, which I'll also get more into later. Chica's the animatronic that got me the most in terms of jump scares. There were many times where I just enter a room only to be greeted by Chica's screams. Bonnie hides underneath a table, and he'll grab you if you go near him while slowly raising the noise meter. In order to escape him, you have to spam the spacebar as fast as you can. Also, you obviously won't be able to run away if Pitbonnie finds you since Bonnie's holding you, so escaping quickly is very important. Bonnie's pretty much a non-threat. The only times I got caught by him were on my first playthrough when I didn't know what he did, and on my second or third playthrough where I just needed to get footage showing what he does. Avoiding him is as easy as looking underneath the tables in front of you, assuming he even spawned, which he rarely does. All Freddy does is block doors, which I'm pretty sure is meant to be a reference to how he works in FNAF 1, since when he reaches your office door in that game, he won't leave. Freddy was even less of a threat than Bonnie. Whenever he showed up, which he also rarely did, I just went through a different door and took a slightly longer path to where I needed to go. It really wasn't a big deal. In my opinion, having Chica be the only animatronic to actually move around was a really smart choice, as if every animatronic roamed around the pizzeria and made a loud noise if they found you, the game would get really tedious really quick. Like I said, the game's like a scaled down version of Security Breach, so while having 3 active threats and multiple staff bots work for that game, it certainly wouldn't for this. The pizzeria is relatively small, so if Bonnie and Freddy also wandered around, you'd probably be running into an animatronic every other room you go in, meaning that you'd pretty much just be spending a majority of your playtime going inside of a hiding spot and waiting for Pitbonnie or one of the animatronics to leave the room. Boxy isn't in this game, and while some people are probably upset that he's not here, I think that his exclusion was a smart decision for the same reason as to why I think that not having Freddy and Bonnie roam around was smart. Foxy's inclusion probably would have made the game feel too cluttered because again, the pizzeria is small. Also, I can't think of any way he'd naturally fit into the gameplay. His whole thing is that he runs down hallways fast, and there's like one hallway and into the pit. What would he even do if he was in this game? Occasionally, the pizzeria's power will go out, and he has to go turn on the fuse box to bring it back. I don't really know why this is in the game, because out of the 4 playthroughs I've done, the power only went out like twice in each one. Like, at that point, just don't put this mechanic in. Spend the dev time adding in the library instead. When the power is out, you can use your flashlight to help see better. However, your flashlight has a limited amount of battery, and if it runs out, you'll have to look around for some more. I definitely prefer this battery system to Security Breach's recharge station system. The stations were so generously spread around the pizzaplex that I never ran out of flashlight power, but here I actually had to strategize my flashlight usage because I never knew when I would find another battery to recharge my flashlight. Back to the things I said I was going to talk about later, those being the noise meter and hiding minigames. The noise meter goes up when you do things like run or pick up items. The longer you run, the more likely you are to trip, which will also raise the noise meter. Slightly off topic, but I think that the tripping mechanic is a good replacement for the stamina meter in Security Breach. Unlike a stamina meter, the tripping mechanic allows you to run as much as you want, with the only downside being that you'll eventually trip. Something that's a minor inconvenience when you're just kind of running around, but a big deal when you're being chased by Pitbonnie. Back to the noise meter, if it turns red, then Pitbonnie will be alerted to your location, so you'll have to hide. However, if you hide while you're being chased, that'll end up triggering a hiding minigame, with the minigame you play being different depending on what hiding spot you're in. If you hide in the golden Freddy suit or a drawer, you'll play through the breathing minigame, where you have to hold space to hold your breath when Pitbonnie is looking for you, and stop holding space when he leaves so you don't get killed by the scariest monster of all, lack of oxygen. The minigame is fine. Again, all you do is hold space, which isn't very exciting, but seeing the oxygen bar slowly deplete while Pitbonnie wasn't showing any signs of leaving was kind of stressful. Hiding in the closet triggers a minigame where you have to get out of Pitbonnie's sight by going from one side of the closet to the other. I'm gonna be honest, I have no idea how one gets into Pitbonnie's line of sight. There were so many times that I felt like I was in it, but he didn't jump scare me, so I guess I wasn't. For the vent and chest hiding minigames, you have to press buttons to swat spiders before they reach the bottom and alert Pitbonnie of your location. This is probably the most stressful minigame. In some cases, you need to press a button the second a spider shows up because they spawn like right at the bottom of the vent. Similar to the vent and chest minigame, the minigame for Oswald's bed consists of trying to stop toys from getting out from underneath the bed by pressing certain buttons. I think that this and a spider minigame are a bit too similar. They're literally the same exact thing, except that the spiders are replaced with toys for the bed. I prefer the spider minigame though, the animations are cooler. Finally, there's a hiding spot minigame you get when hiding underneath a table, and this is the most unique one. In the table minigame, you have to quickly use your flashlight on Pitbonnie when he peeks underneath the table. However, unlike other minigames where you stay inside of the hiding spot once Pitbonnie goes away, you'll get kicked out of the table right after shining the flashlight on him, forcing you to run away before he makes a quick recovery and continues the chase. Also, if your flashlight has no battery, then you can't shine it on Pitbonnie and you automatically die. I think it's interesting to have a hiding spot that serves more as a way to slow Pitbonnie down for a bit instead of making him go away completely, but I don't really like that it's an automatic game over if you have no flashlight battery. It's not that big of a deal once you know about it, but in my first playthrough, I kept down to Pitbonnie here because I had no batteries. Also, none of the other minigames include outside elements like the flashlight, so it's just kind of weird that this one does. Before you go to the pizzeria on most nights, you'll first have to escape Oswald's house while avoiding Pitbonnie. And while the gameplay is pretty much the same as it is in the pizzeria, something pretty interesting is done for the house sections. You see, in the first of two incredible and totally intentional Hello Neighbor references, Pitbonnie will actually block your escape routes after you use them for the first time, much like how Mr. Peterson boards up areas you entered his house to do, when he decides to work, that is. I really like that Pitbonnie does this. The house sections will get pretty repetitive if they just consisted of walking over to the front door every time, so it's nice that each night changes the escape method up a bit. IntothePit has 2 difficulty settings when you start a game, but you get 2 more and the ability to customize things once you beat it. The added settings made the game a lot more replayable, especially the customization options, because you can change pretty much anything, such as how often the animatronics show up, what hiding spots and noisemakers are enabled, flashlight battery, minigame difficulty. You can even turn permadeath on if you hate yourself. Nightmare mode is the hardest mode in the game, as the animatronics show up more, there's less hiding spots and distractions, and permadeath is on. I managed to make it to night 5 on this mode, but I got so scared I would lose all my progress that I just stopped playing. And as if all that didn't make the game replayable enough, the game also has a speedrun timer, so you can keep playing over and over again to try and get a new best time and become the dream of IntothePit. Okay, maybe that's not the best example, but hey, the speedrun timer is still cool. The last thing I want to talk about in terms of gameplay are the minigames and arcade cabinets you can find at Def's Pizza and Freddy's, because they're pretty fun and a nice break from all the horror. The first minigame of the bunch is Skeeball. It's Skeeball. The music's pretty good though. I think it would have been cool if the Skeeball machine was actually FNAF themed instead of being just a normal machine. This thing could have benefited from having Freddy Fazbear's ugly mug plastered all over it.
Please don't kill me!
Next, to deliver the pizza, which is like Crossy Road, but instead of cars, you have to avoid children, which is weird because I thought that this franchise loved it when people got run over by cars. After this is my favorite minigame, Shoot a Space Balloons, and here you have to shoot the Freddy Faz Gang's faces while you play as Balloon Boy. The next one is Fast Food Invader, which, as you can probably guess by the title, is a Space Invaders clone, and I honestly don't get why it's here. It's pretty much just a worse version of Shoot the Space Balloons, which, you know, comes right before this. I just find it more fun to move and shoot all around the map than staying at the bottom and shooting up. Then it's Rescue the Children, a minigame where you have to save children from Pitbonnie, like the minigame from Return to the Pit's secret ending. Also, how and why did Fazbear Entertainment make a game about child murders that happened in their pizzeria? I mean, I'm not that surprised they did this. Help Wanted establishes that this is just like a thing they do to make light of the situation, but like, when did they make this? You can play this minigame while you're at Freddy's and plan that Fazbear Entertainment saw that kids died in their pizzeria and immediately got to work on an arcade game about it, somehow finishing it in one night. Now that's dedication, I think. Collect the Hats is next, and in it you have to collect the hats. The title kind of gives it away. This and Rescue the Children are the least replayable arcade games of the bunch. Every other game has some kind of high score you can get, encouraging more replays, but these two are a one and done thing. I mean, collect the hats to the secret path where you can get a 6th hat because of lore, so I guess there is some replay incentive, but like, it'd be nice if getting that 6th hat was actually fun. Finally is Solve the Puzzle, where you have to solve a Freddy Fazbear jigsaw puzzle. I would like to delete this from the game. So that's all the gameplay IntothePit has to offer. Honestly, I find this to be one of the most fun FNAF games out there, right behind the Help Wanted games. I've actually played IntothePit 4 times because what else am I gonna do in my life? So I've gotten every major thing I wanted to mention out of the way, but before I end the video, I want to quickly talk about some things that I wanted to mention but don't really have much to say about. First of all, the visuals in this game are absolutely incredible. This is genuinely up there with Cuphead as one of my favorite looking games of all time. It's so cool seeing FNAF in a pixelated art style that doesn't look absolutely terrible. The animation in this game is great as well, especially all the cutscenes. I love the animation for Pitbonnie when you're in Golden Freddy, and his death is animated very well. The scenery in the game is also really good. The town actually looks run down, unlike in the graphic novel. Def's Pizza looks messy and its walls are an ugly shade of green. The school has peeling posters and rotting lockers, and there's a bunch of trash where the mill used to be. Oh, and I love all the background references to other FNAF stuff like Trash and Gang, Circus Baby, GGY, and even Garrett's plane from the movie. The game even has Mr. Peterson from Hello Neighbor sitting at Def's Pizza. Wait, what?
Hello, neighbor bear trap! Try this on for size, Mr. Peterson. What? No!
Also, I like how the pause menu is filled with some of Oswald's drawings. I didn't mention this while talking about the book, but Oswald liking to draw is something that just kind of gets forgotten about after it's initially introduced to connect into Freddy's. I mean, the interactive novel kind of expands on the fact by giving a reason as to why he draws, but it also just gets forgotten about afterwards. Having Oswald's drawings show up in the menu was a great way of having them actually be in the game after their initial introduction. By the way, instead of drawing the Faz Gang, Oswald is drawing Pitbonnie at the start of the game, which is a cool way to further connect it to. Phone Guy is in this game, but his voice is different. Why does Scott Cawthon refuse to reprise his role as Phone Guy? He's not in the movie either. I don't get it. The music is, in my opinion, one of the most underrated aspects of the FNAF franchise. Sure, everybody talks about the Living Tombstone song and El Hugueny's masterpieces, but who talks about Scorched Cranberries from Help Wanted 2? IntothePit's music doesn't disappoint either. Def's Pizza is really catchy, and Voices from the Pit is a really cool end credit song, though it is a bit short. The arcade machine songs are especially good. Again, the Skeeball music goes hard. The game has an extras menu where you can see animatronic sprites, introductions, jump scares, items, minigames, and music, which is really cool. It's like a more robust version of the extras menu from games 3 to 5. I actually found Into the Pit to be a pretty scary game, and that's coming from someone that doesn't find FNAF scary. I mean, you can only watch so many videos of Freddy Fazbear twerking before the horror aspect of the character starts to wear off. The only games I found to be scary before this are Help Wanted and Curse of Dreadbear, but those are VR games, so of course they'd be scary. Freddy Fazbear is a lot more terrifying when you're close enough to boop his nose. Into the Pit is genuinely scary though, and its tone is actually a bit darker than most FNAF games, especially the more recent ones. But then again, that's like saying that Schindler's List has a darker tone than the Angry Birds movie. Sure, Pitbonnie's jump scares are predictable, but what isn't is when Pitbonnie or Chica will show up. I was very on edge throughout the entire game, knowing that due to the small pizzeria size, Pitbonnie can show up to the room I'm in at any second. Also, some of the scripted jump scares really got me, specifically the 2 spider jump scares. Those were evil. Like I said earlier, the game is split into daytime and nighttime segments, with the day parts having a more lighthearted tone and the nights being a bit more serious. I like how there's not much comedy in the nighttime sections. Mostly keeping it in the day keeps the game's tone a bit more consistent. It'd be hard to take the game seriously if the animatronics were cracking hilarious singers like Exotic Butters. I do not like Sister Location. The jokes the game has are funny though. I've always liked FNAF jokes, except when I didn't. The games just have such a stupid sense of humor, which is great because I'm stupid. There's one teacher that's just called Underpaid Teacher, and Bonnie doing the vector dance was pretty funny. The IntothePit game easily has my favorite version of Pitbonnie as well. I think Return to the Pit's version has a creepier design, but this one is like really cool. That being said, Pitbonnie's design was pretty scary when he was luring Oswald to the back room. Also, the game makes up for Pitbonnie not having a very scary design by making him move and breathe all freaky like. Pitbonnie's breathing genuinely scares me. It doesn't even sound like breathing. I don't like it. I like the other characters as well. Jeff actually looks like he was described in the book, and he's the funniest character. Oswald's dad looks like George Cooper, and Oswald himself has a good design, especially compared to how he looks like in the graphic novel. Well, that's all I have to say about the IntothePit game. In conclusion, it's a perfect way to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the franchise, bringing it back to a time where it didn't have much of a focus on science fiction, while also having a time traveling but not really ball pit. Actually, maybe the ball pit does time travel in this game. It's never confirmed or denied. The game is fun, has a good story, looks incredible, and unlike other FNAF games, has sad moments that actually work, mostly because they don't get undone in 5 minutes. I'm still mad how Ruin had a whole sad moment for Roxy's death, only to reveal that she's actually fine. Anyways, this video has gone on for long enough. I think it's time to start wrapping it up. So, that's it. I finally finished talking about all 4 versions of Into the Pit. And after all that, what did I learn? Good question, I don't know. With the exception of the graphic novel, the IntothePit books were actually pretty good. Are they genius pieces of literature? Absolutely not, but they were a fun read. The game, on the other hand, is incredible. Adapting IntothePit was the perfect choice to celebrate 10 years of Freddy Freakbear. Like I said earlier, it's a great combination of new and old, with plenty of callbacks to stuff from across the franchise. The game is a big celebration of FNAF, this stupid little franchise that I really like for some reason. Five Nights at Freddy's is a pretty important franchise to me. Sure, it's not exactly high art, and I really don't like some things that come from this thing, but I don't know, I've got fond memories of my friends showing me FNAF the musical, of me watching Dan TDM's Help Wanted videos to get over my fear of Freddy, and of me watching game theory videos to see what wacky revelation Map has stumbled upon. I'm a very introverted person and I don't really go out with friends, but the first time I did was to see the FNAF movie. Heck, FNAF is the reason I even know some of my friends in the first place. As stupid as it is to say, Five Nights at Freddy's has had a big impact on my life, so having a game that celebrates it, I don't know, I think that's pretty cool. Well, anyways, I'm gonna go now. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.